Vincent van Gogh, the great Dutch artist, grew up in a Christian home. His parents told him about the love and truth of Jesus Christ. And Vincent van Gogh put his faith in Christ as a young man. He was deeply committed to Christ, but then he started experiencing depression. And the deeper he sank into depression, the more cynical he became. And eventually, Vincent van Gogh walked away from his faith. His depression became incredibly destructive as he maimed himself. But then slowly and gradually, you begin to watch him moving out of that depression back to faith in Christ. Vincent van Gogh used the color yellow in his paintings to picture the light of God, the grace of God, the love of God. And it's fascinating to watch his artwork. His pictures began to include more and more yellow, more and more light, more and more joy. And it's fascinating that that color yellow that he used in his paintings represented for him the presence of Christ, the presence of God. And then in his painting, The Rising of Lazarus, he actually puts his head, his face, on the body of Lazarus. Depression, fear, anxiety, worry can make us retreat from life, can make us retreat from God. And yet that's sad. Instead, God calls us to trust in Him and then to allow Him to help us work through our depression, our fear, our anxieties, our worries. Too many people in America today think that the purpose of faith in God is to have God solve all my problems so that there's no more pain, no more suffering. No, that's incorrect. When you and I experience pain, the challenge is to ask ourselves, God, what are you trying to teach me in the midst of this pain, in the midst of this suffering? The challenge for you and for me as human beings is to work through our pain so that we can know Christ better. In Philippians chapter 3, verse 10, the Apostle Paul writes, I want to know Christ and the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in His sufferings. The fellowship of sharing in His sufferings. Do you understand? The all-powerful, eternal God humbled Himself, became a human being, and suffered. Jesus experienced pain. And Peter writes that Jesus used pain to teach him to always obey the Father. You and I can experience pain. And when we experience pain, the challenge is, are we going to allow pain to wake us up to the deeper issues of life, or are we going to allow pain to drive us into depression, into bitterness, into anger, into resentment against God, into disappointment with God?